Struggling mechanic gives shelter to a lost hitchhiker, but her true identity changes everything. Eli Reeves slammed his fist against the steering wheel of his rusted pickup truck, cursing as rain hammered the windshield. 3 unpaid repair jobs, a stack of overdue bills, and now this, the storm of the decade on the one night he needed to drive across county lines to pick up a second-hand transmission that might save his failing auto shop. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the rain-soaked highway stretching before him. Desolate. Empty. The kind of road where bad decisions were made and worse fates were sealed. Just keep it together, he muttered, squinting through the windshield wipers that squealed against the glass. That's when he saw her, a solitary figure on the roadside, thumb extended, drenched to the bone. Eli's foot eased off the accelerator instinctively, though his brain screamed at him to keep driving. Picking up strangers was how people ended up as cautionary tales on the evening news. Still, something about the desperation in her stance made him pull over, tires splashing through puddles as he braked. The woman ran toward his truck, a small backpack clutched to her chest. Eli rolled down the passenger window just enough to hear her over the downpour. "Please," she gasped, rainwater streaming down her face. "I need to get to the next town, anywhere away from here." She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her head and wide hazel eyes rimmed with what might have been tears or just rain. Her clothes, designer jeans and a light jacket that probably cost more than his monthly rent, were completely inappropriate for the weather. "You running from something?" Eli asked, his voice rough. He'd seen that hunted look before. Hell, he'd worn it himself once upon a time. "No," she said quickly, then, "maybe." "Please, I can pay." She fumbled with her pocket and produced a wad of crumpled bills. Eli eyed the money, then her face again. His financial situation was desperate enough that the cash was tempting, but he didn't like complications. And this woman, whoever she was, practically radiated complications. "Keep your money," he said with a sigh, reaching across to unlock the door. "Get in before you drown out there." She didn't need to be told twice. She yanked the door open and scrambled inside, bringing with her the scent of rain and expensive perfume that seemed oddly out of place in his beaten-up truck. "I'm Zoe," she offered, hugging her backpack tight against her chest. "Eli," he responded curtly. "Where exactly am I taking you?" She stared straight ahead at the rain-streaked windshield. "Just, away. As far as you're going." Eli shifted the truck into drive, unease settling in his stomach. He'd already made one stupid decision tonight, he didn't need to compound it with another. "I'm headed to Crestfield. That work for you?" Zoe nodded quickly. "Perfect. Thank you." They drove in silence for several miles, the only sounds the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Eli kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel her tension radiating across the cab. "So," he finally said, "you want to tell me what you're really running from?" She stiffened. "I told you. Lady, I wasn't born yesterday. Nobody stands in a storm like this unless they're more afraid of what's behind them than what's ahead." Zoe's fingers tightened around her backpack. "It's complicated." "It always is," Eli muttered. As they crested a hill, headlights suddenly appeared in his rearview mirror, bright, aggressive, closing fast. Zoe twisted in her seat, her face draining of color. "They found me," she whispered. Before Eli could demand an explanation, the vehicle behind them, a sleek black SUV, flashed what looked suspiciously like law enforcement lights. "Are those cops?" Eli demanded, already slowing down. "Because if you've got me harboring a fugitive." "They're not police," Zoe said, her voice taut with fear. "Please don't stop. They work for my father." "Your father?" Eli's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "What the hell have you gotten me into?" The SUV lurched forward, nearly clipping his rear bumper. Eli cursed and accelerated, the old truck groaning in protest. "My name is Zoe Campbell," she said quickly. My father is Victor Campbell. The name hit Eli like a physical blow. Everyone knew Victor Campbell, tech mogul, billionaire, the man whose corporate empire had bought out half the state and whose smiling face appeared on business magazines and local billboards. Why is Victor Campbell's security team chasing his daughter down a back road in the middle of nowhere? Zoe's eyes met his, desperate and pleading. Because I found out what he's really doing with his company. And because I refused to marry the son of his business partner to seal a merger deal. The SUV rammed them from behind, sending the truck lurching forward. Eli swore, fighting for control as the steering wheel jerked beneath his hands. Hold on. He wrenched the wheel hard, veering onto a nearly invisible dirt road that cut through dense forest. The truck bounced violently over ruts and potholes, branches scraping against the windows like desperate fingers. For a heart-stopping moment, the SUV's headlights followed them, then vanished as Eli took another sharp turn. The truck fishtailed in the mud before regaining traction. I know somewhere we can hide, he said grimly. But when we get there, you're telling me everything. Zoe nodded, her face ghostly in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Everything, she promised. The rain continued to fall as they vanished deeper into the forest, leaving no tracks for their pursuers to follow. Behind them, hidden in the storm, the hunters regrouped, vehicles spreading out across the dark roads. The chase had only just begun. The cabin materialized through sheets of rain like a mirage, a weathered structure nestled among pine trees that swayed and groaned in the wind. Eli killed the headlights before easing the truck behind the building, out of sight from the main road. My grandfather's hunting cabin, he explained as the engine shuddered into silence. Nobody knows about it except family. Zoe peered through the rain-streaked window. Will they find us here? Not tonight. Maybe not ever, if we're lucky. Eli grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment. Come on. They dashed through the downpour to the cabin's sagging porch. Eli fumbled with an old key, cursing as the lock stuck before finally giving way. The door swung open on protesting hinges, revealing a single room smelling of dust and pine. It's not the Ritz, Eli said, shining his flashlight around the sparse interior, a stone fireplace, a small kitchenette, a worn sofa, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. It's perfect, Zoe whispered, dropping her backpack on the rough wooden floor. Eli busied himself lighting the oil lamps and stoking a fire in the hearth, grateful for the mundane tasks that kept his mind from dwelling on the absurdity of his situation. Within 20 minutes, the cabin glowed with warm light, and the chill began to retreat. You should change, he said, noticing Zoe's shivering. Bathrooms through there. I think there are some old clothes in the chest, my sister's, maybe. While Zoe disappeared into the tiny bathroom, Eli checked his phone, no signal, as expected. They were truly cut off, for better or worse. When Zoe emerged wearing an oversized flannel shirt and faded jeans, Eli had 2 mugs of instant coffee waiting. Now, he said, pushing one toward her, tell me everything. Zoe wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into its depths as if gathering courage. My father built Campbell Technologies from nothing. The public knows him as a visionary, a philanthropist. Her voice hardened. But his empire is built on lies. She reached for her backpack, extracting a small flash drive. 3 weeks ago, I found this in my father's study. I wasn't snooping, I was looking for an old family photo album. But what I found instead? She shook her head. Financial records. Shell companies. Bribes to government officials. Money laundering through his charitable foundation. Eli's expression remained skeptical. And you just happened to download all this? I grew up watching my father destroy people who got in his way. When I found these files, I knew, her voice caught. I knew I needed insurance. Thunder rolled outside as if punctuating her statement. So why run now? Zoe's fingers tightened around the mug. My father announced my engagement to Julian Rhodes 2 weeks ago. Julian's father owns Rhodes Pharmaceuticals. The marriage would merge our companies and create a monopoly over half the tech medical sector. Her eyes flashed with anger. I wasn't consulted. I was informed. When I refused, my father threatened to cut me off completely. Then he showed his true colors. She pulled down the collar of her shirt, revealing a darkening bruise on her collarbone. He said if I didn't cooperate, I'd disappear. My father doesn't make idle threats. Eli leaned back, processing. So you ran with the evidence. Not just that. Last month, one of my father's researchers disappeared. Dr. Sarah Chen. She was developing a revolutionary cancer treatment. The official story is she took her research to a competitor. But I found emails. Zoe swallowed hard. My father had her eliminated when she threatened to go public with concerns about ethical violations. Eli rubbed his face, feeling the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. Jesus. The night I left, I overheard my father talking to Julian's father. The merger isn't just about business, it's about combining technologies for military applications. Surveillance. Weapons. Things that were never meant to see the light of day. A crack of lightning illuminated the cabin in stark white, followed by an explosive thunderclap that made the windows rattle. In that flash, Eli caught sight of genuine terror in Zoe's eyes, not the fear of someone running a con, but the raw dread of someone who had glimpsed something terrible and couldn't unsee it. Why me? Eli finally asked. Why trust a stranger with all this? Zoe met his gaze steadily. I didn't choose you. Fate did. But I've learned to read people quickly, and you. She hesitated. You have honest eyes. Eli almost laughed. My ex-wife would disagree. Is that why you're alone in a cabin in the middle of nowhere? That's a story for another time. Eli stood abruptly, uncomfortable with the way the conversation had turned personal. We should get some rest. You take the bed. I'll take the couch. As he turned away, Zoe caught his wrist. Her touch was light, but it froze him in place. Thank you, she said softly. For not turning me away. Eli nodded stiffly before pulling his arm free. He didn't trust himself to speak. Later, as rain drummed steadily on the roof and Zoe's breathing evened into sleep, Eli sat by the dying fire, turning the flash drive over in his hands. Part of him, the pragmatic part that had survived a brutal divorce and the slow death of his business, screamed to walk away. Drive Zoe to the nearest bus station in the morning and forget he ever met her. But another part, a part he thought had been buried years ago, whispered that some fights were worth fighting, even when the odds were impossible. The cabin creaked and settled around him like an old man sighing. Outside, far down the winding road that led back to civilization, headlights swept through the trees, searching, hunting. Eli slipped the flash drive into his pocket and stoked the fire back to life. Whatever came next, he knew there would be no going back to the life he'd known before. For better or worse, their fates were now intertwined. Dawn broke reluctantly through the pine trees, pale light filtering into the cabin where Eli dozed in an uncomfortable slouch on the sofa. The crunch of tires on gravel jerked him awake, instincts firing before his conscious mind could catch up. Zoe, he hissed, crossing to the bed in 3 quick strides. Someone's here. She bolted upright, fear instantly animating her features. How did they? No time. Eli grabbed her backpack and tossed it to her. Back door. Now. They moved silently through the cabin as voices approached the front porch, men's voices, low and professional. Eli eased the back door open, wincing at its slight creak. The forest stretched before them, thick with undergrowth and morning mist. Stay close, he whispered. Step where I step. They slipped into the tree line just as the cabin door splintered open behind them. Eli led them along a barely visible deer trail, his mind racing through escape routes. The truck was compromised, and they were miles from the nearest town. But there was another option, risky, but possible. My buddy Marco has a garage about 3 miles east, he breathed as they navigated through dense ferns. He owns me for fixing his boat engine last summer. Zoe nodded, her breathing controlled despite the pace he set. They moved steadily for 20 minutes before the sound of pursuit reached them, crashing through underbrush, dogs barking in the distance. They brought dogs. Zoe's composure cracked. Change of plans. Eli veered sharply toward a sound only he could hear, the faint rush of water. This way. The stream appeared through the trees, swollen from the night's rain. Without hesitation, Eli waded in, pulling Zoe after him. The frigid water shocked his system, but he pushed forward, following the current downstream. The water will mask our scent, he explained as they sloshed through the knee-deep stream. And there's an old service road half a mile down that Marco uses for towing. They emerged from the stream 30 minutes later, soaked and shivering but alive. The service road was little more than a dirt track cutting through the forest, but it represented their best chance. They followed it in tense silence, alert to every sound. When Marco's garage finally appeared through the trees, a corrugated metal building with a gravel lot full of junked cars, Eli felt relief flood through him. He pounded on the side door, praying his friend was already at work. Marco Diaz opened the door, his broad face registering surprise then concern at their bedraggled appearance. Eli. What the hell, man? Need a favor, Eli said simply. No questions. Marco hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Must be some favor. Inside, surrounded by the comforting smell of motor oil and grease, Eli quickly explained that they needed transportation, discreet, untraceable. Marco's eyes flickered to Zoe, taking in her expensive watch and the way she carried herself despite her sodden clothes. This got something to do with those suits asking questions in town last night? Marco asked shrewdly. Eli stiffened. What suits? Showed your picture around. Said you stole something valuable. Marco folded his arms. I told them I hadn't seen you in weeks. They're lying, Zoe interjected. They work for my father. He's Victor Campbell. Marco let out a low whistle. The tech guy. His face is on a billboard outside town. His expression hardened. Never trusted a man who needs his face 50 feet tall. He disappeared into a back room, returning with keys and a thermos of coffee. Blue sedan behind the shop. Registration's under my cousin's name. There's a prepaid phone in the glove box. He pressed the keys into Eli's hand. You must have your reasons, brother. Make good ones. 20 minutes later, freshened up and wearing clean clothes from Marco's lost and found box, they were on the road again. Zoe sat silently beside Eli, staring out the window as pine forests gave way to open farmland. Your friend didn't even ask what we're running from, she finally said. Eli kept his eyes on the road. Marco and I go way back. He knows I wouldn't be running if I had a choice. Is that what we're doing? Running? The question hung between them. Eli tightened his grip on the steering wheel. What's the alternative? Your father has resources, connections. We're just two people with a flash drive. We could take it to the authorities. You really think the police will believe us over Victor Campbell? A man who apparently has them in his pocket. Eli shook his head. We need leverage. Something more concrete. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. There is someone who might help us, she finally said. Dr. Chen's research partner, Dr. Maya Patel. She left Campbell Technologies after Sarah disappeared. Last I heard, she was working at a university in Riverdale, about 100 miles north of here. Eli considered this. You think she'd talk to us? If she knew what happened to Sarah? Maybe. Zoe traced a pattern on the foggy window beside her. She was in love with Sarah. They kept it quiet because of company policy, but everyone knew. Eli adjusted their course, heading north. Riverdale it is. They drove in contemplative silence for several miles before Zoe spoke again, her voice softer than before. "Earlier, you mentioned an ex-wife." Eli's jaw tightened. "Ancient history." "Not that ancient, judging by your expression." He sighed, recognizing the diversion for what it was, a way to escape their present danger, if only conversationally. "Rebecca. We were high school sweethearts. Got married young, started the auto shop together. She kept the books, I kept the engines running." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Found out she was cooking those books. Siphoning money to fund a gambling habit I didn't know about. By the time I discovered it, we were in debt up to our eyeballs." "What happened?" "She left. Disappeared one night with what little cash we had left." Eli's laugh was hollow. "Sent divorce papers from Vegas 3 months later." "I'm sorry," Zoe said quietly. "Don't be. Taught me a valuable lesson about trust. Yet here you are, trusting a stranger." Eli glanced at her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she faced forward despite everything she'd lost. "Maybe you're not the only one with a complicated relationship with your past," he admitted. As they crested a hill, the road stretched before them, straight, empty, promising. For the first time since this journey began, Eli felt something shift inside him. It wasn't hope, exactly. But it was something close. "So," he said, pressing harder on the accelerator. "Tell me more about Dr. Patel." Behind them, the road unspooled like thread from a spool, and somewhere in the distance, the hunters regrouped, recalibrated, and resumed their pursuit. But for this moment, this breath between heartbeats, they were free, moving forward together toward whatever waited on the horizon. Riverdale University's science complex loomed against the afternoon sky, a monument to modern architecture with its glass walls and steel framework. Eli waited in the borrowed sedan, watching as Zoe disappeared through the main entrance. They had agreed it was safer for her to approach Dr. Patel alone. Eli's presence might raise suspicions. An hour crawled by. Then 2. Anxiety gnawed at Eli's insides. He was about to break their agreement and go looking for her when Zoe emerged, accompanied by a petite woman with silver-streaked black hair. Dr. Maya Patel walked with purpose, her expression grave as she led Zoe to a bench in the university's courtyard. Their conversation appeared intense, with Dr. Patel shaking her head emphatically at times, then covering her face with her hands. After what seemed an eternity, the women embraced. "Dar." Patel pressed something into Zoe's hand before walking swiftly back toward the building. When Zoe slid into the passenger seat, her eyes were rimmed with red, but her expression was determined. She confirmed everything, Zoe said without preamble. Sarah was developing a targeted therapy for aggressive cancers. The technology worked, too well. My father saw the military applications immediately. When Sarah refused to redirect her research, she was eliminated. Did Dr. Patel have proof? Zoe held up a small microSD card. Sarah sent her encrypted files before she disappeared, research notes, emails, recorded conversations. She knew she was in danger. Her voice caught. Maya's been afraid to come forward. After Sarah vanished, she received a bouquet of lilies, Sarah's favorite flower, with a card saying, "Silence blooms eternal." Eli's stomach turned. Witness intimidation. But she's willing to testify now. For Sarah. Zoe slipped the microSD card into her backpack alongside the flash drive. We need to get these to the federal authorities. Not local police, they can't be trusted. There's a field office in Hartford, Eli said, starting the engine. About 3 hours from here. They merged onto the highway as dusk began to fall, the sedan blending with commuter traffic. For the first time since their flight began, Eli felt a glimmer of hope. With Dr. Patel's testimony and the combined evidence, they might actually have a chance against Victor Campbell. Night had fully descended by the time they reached the outskirts of Hartford. Too exhausted to continue safely, they checked into a roadside motel under Marco's cousin's name, paying cash. The room was basic but clean, 2 double beds, a bathroom, and peeling wallpaper that had once been white. "Tomorrow morning, we end this," Eli said, collapsing onto one of the beds. "First thing, we go to the FBI." Zoe nodded, her gaze distant. "You've risked everything for me." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Eli considered deflecting, but found himself speaking truth instead. "After Rebecca left, I stopped believing in anything worth fighting for. I fixed cars, paid bills, existed." He met her eyes. "This past week, helping you, it feels like waking up." Zoe crossed the room, sitting beside him on the bed. "When this is over, what will you do?" "Haven't thought that far ahead." "You build something new. Something honest." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. "Maybe not alone." The moment stretched between them, electric and fragile. Then Zoe leaned forward, pressing her lips to his, hesitant at first, then with certainty. Eli's arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, months of isolation and distrust melting away in the warmth of human connection. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Zoe's head resting on his chest, Eli realized he had crossed a threshold he couldn't return from. Whatever happened tomorrow, his life had irrevocably changed course. "We should get some sleep," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Big day tomorrow." Zoe nodded against him, her breathing already slowing. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Eli drifted into sleep with her words echoing in his mind, a promise and a benediction. He woke to emptiness and silence. The bed beside him was cold, the indent of Zoe's body already fading from the mattress. Sunlight streamed through thin curtains, illuminating the room's vacancy. Eli bolted upright, heart hammering. "Zoe?" No answer from the bathroom. No note on the bedside table. No backpack by the door. Just absence, stark and undeniable. Panic propelled him from the bed. The car keys were missing. So was the flash drive he'd placed in his jacket pocket. Everything, gone. Betrayal hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. How could he have been so stupid? So blind? The intimacy they'd shared, had it all been manipulation? A way to lower his guard so she could disappear with the evidence? Eli sank onto the edge of the bed, hands shaking with rage and hurt. The pattern was painfully familiar, Rebecca all over again, trust extended only to be broken. But as his initial shock receded, doubt crept in. Zoe's fear had been genuine. Her bruises real. The danger pursuing them undeniable. Why run now, when they were so close to their goal? Unless... Eli lunged for the remote, switching on the motel room's ancient television. He flipped channels until he found local news, where a breaking story sent ice through his veins. Developing this morning, a spokesperson for Campbell Technologies confirms that CEO Victor Campbell will make a major announcement at today's shareholders' meeting regarding the company's merger with Rhodes Pharmaceuticals. Sources indicate the deal, valued at over $8 billion, will be finalized today at Campbell Tower in downtown Hartford. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Eli grabbed his few belongings and rushed out of the room. The sedan was gone, as expected, but the motel was within walking distance of a bus stop. As he waited for the bus to downtown Hartford, Eli's mind raced. Had Zoe decided to confront her father directly? Was she planning something desperate? Or had she been playing him all along, working some angle he couldn't see? He remembered the softness of her voice in the darkness, the vulnerability in her eyes when she spoke of Dr. Chen. Had it all been an act? No. Whatever her reasons for leaving, Eli refused to believe that. The bus arrived, hissing to a stop before him. As he boarded, Eli made a decision. He would find Zoe. He would hear the truth from her own lips. And then, only then, would he decide what to believe. Campbell Tower gleamed in the morning sun, a monument to wealth and power rising 70 stories above Hartford's skyline. Eli stood across the street, watching dark-suited security guards checking credentials at the entrance. Shareholders and press filed in for the meeting, creating a steady stream of activity. Somewhere inside, Victor Campbell prepared to cement his corporate empire. Somewhere inside, perhaps, Zoe was executing whatever plan had driven her to leave in the night. And Eli, outsider, betrayed, determined, watched and waited for his moment to intervene, his moment to discover whether the connection they'd shared had been genuine or just another beautiful lie. Campbell Tower's lobby gleamed with marble and hubris, a temple to corporate success where security guards stood like modern centurions, watchful and unyielding. Eli had no credentials, no invitation, and absolutely no business being there, facts made painfully obvious when 2 guards intercepted him before he'd taken 10 steps inside. "Sir, this is a private event," the taller guard said, positioning himself to block Eli's path. "I need to speak with Zoe Campbell," Eli insisted, scanning the bustling lobby. "It's urgent." The guards exchanged glances. "Ms. Campbell isn't taking visitors," the second guard replied, his hand moving subtly toward his earpiece. Eli's heart rate quickened. Not taking visitors meant Zoe was here. But why? What was she planning? "Please," Eli tried again. "Just tell her Eli Reeves is here. She'll want to know." A voice behind him, smooth as expensive whiskey and twice as intoxicating, interrupted. "I'll handle this, gentlemen." Eli turned to find himself face to face with Julian Rhodes, heir to Rhodes Pharmaceuticals and Zoe's unwanted fiancé. In person, he was every bit the corporate prince his press photos suggested, tailored suit, perfect hair, cold eyes assessing Eli like he was examining an insect under glass. "Mr. Reeves," Julian said, the name spoken like something distasteful. "Zoe mentioned you might appear. Walk with me." The guard stepped aside, and before Eli could respond, Julian steered him toward a secluded alcove away from curious eyes. "Where is she?" Eli demanded once they were alone. Julian smiled thinly. "Preparing for the announcement, of course. Today's a momentous day for both our families." "She doesn't want this merger," Eli said. "She doesn't want you." "What Zoe wants has become irrelevant," Julian replied with chilling calm. "She made her choice last night when she returned home." Eli felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath him. "She went back to her father willingly?" Julian's smile widened. "Let's say she saw reason. Victor can be very persuasive." A cold knot formed in Eli's stomach. "What did he do to her?" "Nothing compared to what awaits you if you disrupt today's proceedings." Julian straightened his already impeccable tie. "I suggest you leave now, while leaving is still an option. Zoe has returned to where she belongs. Your services are no longer required." Before Eli could respond, Julian turned and strode back toward the elevators, leaving Eli alone with the terrible implications of his words. Zoe hadn't betrayed him. She'd sacrificed herself, returned to her father's control to protect Eli, or perhaps to execute some desperate plan from the inside. Either way, she was in danger. Eli moved toward the exit, mind racing. The guards watched him go, communication devices buzzing with updated security protocols. He stepped out onto the street, breathed deeply, and considered his options. He had no credentials, no way past security, and no allies within Campbell Tower. What he did have was the prepaid phone from Marco's glove compartment, and one desperate idea. 20 minutes later, Eli stood in a coffee shop across from Campbell Tower, watching as Dr. Maya Patel entered the building, press credentials hanging from her neck. Their hastily arranged meeting outside had lasted barely 5 minutes, just long enough for Eli to explain the situation and for Dr. Patel, eyes burning with quiet fury, to agree to help. "For Sarah," she had said simply. Now, as the minutes ticked toward the shareholders' meeting, Eli could only wait and hope that Dr. Patel could reach Zoe before it was too late. The coffee shop television flickered to life with breaking news. We're live outside Campbell Tower, where tech giant Victor Campbell is about to announce the historic merger with Rhodes Pharmaceuticals. Sources say the deal, worth billions, will revolutionize the medical technology sector. Eli watched as cameras panned across the tower's gleaming facade, then cut to the interior of a conference room where rows of shareholders and press waited expectantly. And there, at the head table, sat Victor Campbell, silver-haired and imperious, flanked by Julian Rhodes and, to Eli's shock, Zoe. She wore a tailored suit in Campbell Technologies' signature blue, her dark hair swept back, face composed into a mask of professional courtesy. But even through the television screen, Eli could see the tightness around her eyes, the rigid set of her shoulders. She was a prisoner on display. Victor Campbell approached the podium, the crowd falling silent as he prepared to speak. Eli leaned forward, heart pounding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Campbell began, his voice resonant with practiced authority. "Today marks not just a merger of companies, but a merger of visions. Campbell Technologies and Rhodes Pharmaceuticals share a commitment to innovation, to progress, and to humanity's future." The camera panned to Julian, nodding in scripted agreement, then to Zoe, whose eyes suddenly widened fractionally as she glanced toward the back of the room. Campbell continued his speech, unaware of the subtle shift in his daughter's expression. "This partnership will allow us to explore new frontiers in medical technology, pushing boundaries that were once thought." He stopped mid-sentence as a commotion erupted at the back of the conference room. The camera swung wildly, revealing Dr. Maya Patel striding down the center aisle, flanked by two individuals in dark suits, not security, Eli realized with a jolt, but federal agents. Victor Campbell, Dr. Patel's voice rang out, amplified by the room's acoustics, "I'm here to speak about Sarah Chen." A ripple of confusion spread through the assembled crowd. Campbell's expression hardened. "Security," he snapped into the microphone.